Good evening. You are watching a special edition of Beyond Headlines on Freedom Square TV. We are reaching you from our Enugu studios. Of course, Enugu is in the southeast part of Nigeria. In 1995, 30 years ago, world leaders, activists, and policymakers gathered in Beijing for the Fourth World Conference on Women, producing what is still regarded as the most ambitious global blueprint for gender equality. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action of 1995. The Platform for Action outlined 12 critical areas of concern, including women and poverty, education and training of women, women and health, violence against women, women and armed conflicts, women and the economy, women in power and decision-making, institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women, human rights of women, women and the media, women and environment, and of course the girl child. Nigeria was part of that historic moment, pledging to remove barriers that prevent women from enjoying full and equal rights in political participation, education, health, economic opportunities, and protection from violence. The International Labour Organization, to mark the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration in March this year, highlighted that while progress has been made, it has been uneven and insufficient. With global gender employment gaps narrowing by only 4% points in 3 decades, women remain underrepresented in employment, and of course overrepresented in informal work, and face persistent pay gaps. In Nigeria, 30 years later, where do our women stand? Have we made progress, or are the promises still unfulfilled? And what must be done to secure the dignity, voice, and the empowerment of women in the years ahead? To guide us through this conversation, we have been joined by one of Africa's foremost advocates for women's rights, Professor Joy Ngozi Ezeilo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, OON, Life Venture, founder of WACOL Tamar SARC, and former Dean of Law at the University of Nigeria, of course, the Enugu campus of the University of Nigeria. With over 30 years of professional experience, Prof. Joy Ezeilo specializes in international law, gender and sexual reproductive rights. Between 2008 to 2014, she served as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons. In 2022, BBC listed her among 100 women of impact in the world. She is a high chief in Igbo land. In fact, some people say she's a triple chief. She's popularly known in some quarters as a Ochendu. But most importantly, she is known as Adeje Jembandibo. Prof, Chief, Sir, and Life Venture.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Cyril Anyoke. It's a pleasure indeed to be at the Freedom Square Television and to discuss this very vital issue, especially as the world marks 30th anniversary of Beijing Conference.
Thank you. Before we go into the nitty-gritty of the 30 years of Beijing, last week, just the past 1 week or thereabout, witnessed the Carnival of Sorts.
True.
Witnessed what many call or describe as the largest gathering of lawyers anywhere in Africa.
True, true.
And you were a very part of it.
Yes.
What have been your takeaway?
Oh, a lot. Because like you rightly said, the Nigerian Bar Association is the largest bar in Africa. And then even in the world, if after India and China, maybe we just will rank, within fifth. So we are really, and for Enugu to host it, even by Providence, became really very good for us, especially for us that are Enugu residents, Coast City people that we are born and bred here. For me, it was really, looking at the team, saying standing out, standing tall. But again, these are within the context of justice ecosystem. Stand out, stand tall, for justice sector reform, for good governance, for rule of law in particular, and then solidarity that is important. So if you look at the conference, look at the issues that were discussed, you find that it was very inclusive of old, young, new wigs, inclusive of people from other professions coming to also interact and give us talk, because it's not just about lawyers. Others need to know and also have their take about rule of law. And then again, when you look at the major takeaways, for example, the commitment of Nigerian Bar Association to play a role in providing pro bono to the poor and the vulnerable, and the establishment of pro bono fund, which they've committed money by MBA, is unprecedented. And we are quite happy. And for a number of partners that came, it was also a time for them to recommit. UNICEF played a role. WACOL, we had a session that we discussed also issues of status of women and the Beijing, especially the special seat. And then we had people, the Deputy High Commissioner, Gileva, we had the UN Women, we have UNESCO director, we have the director of the African Center for Human Rights from Pretoria, South Africa. We have Aisha Yesufu, the activist, and it was really well, and WACOL principal legal officers providing pro bono legal aid. So it just re-emphasized or reaffirmed the need for lawyers to assume the role they are supposed to assume in society. They are the ones to wield accountability stake. They are the ones to raise the bar when you talk about rule of law. They are the ones to lead for others to follow. And if we start faltering, and if things start going wrong with lawyers, then you know that society is in trouble. And that's the whole essence of it. So the access to justice component is important, so that we look at every aspect of it. All the administrators of justice, the security sector, and they really participated. You have people from the police, from DSS, from immigration, from correctional facilities, and then, like I said, it was an interface, so that if we talk about commercialization of the police, we get people to tell us what's really the problem here. And we got the police representing IGP to say, look, if anybody asks you for this, ask for receipt. But these are not laughing matter. It just means that it's opportunity for us to address pressing societal problems. And in addressing those pressing societal problems, the way it matters for all. Like when it came to access to justice panel, there was a panel, they really did it, security. Actually, citizens' rights and security issue. There was no woman on the panel. And of course, I picked it up. I said, we cannot have this panel. We cannot talk about security and fundamental rights without women and children that bears the brunt. It is so imperative that we bring them. They are really, they bear the brunt of gender-based violence, and they need to participate fully. And their concerns, especially in this area of Jennifer Law experience, Comfort Emerson, the BRT bus person that was killed, the woman who was, murdered in a church during the COVID time. You see, there is a spike in gender-based violence. And then the insecurity in the country is also making women more vulnerable, because we are having fewer and fewer safer spaces, fewer and fewer safer cities, for women and other people who are vulnerable to walk freely on the street. And these are issues of concern in terms of their ability to enjoy their fundamental human rights. Right to movement, right to security of person, right to bodily integrity, right to freedom from torture, degrading, inhuman treatment, and punishment. All of these are fundamental rights. And right to freedom from discrimination, right to be recognized as a human being, right to life that should not be abrogated under any circumstance, except through lawful means and through court for someone who is tried and convicted. Even suspected suspects have rights, and their right must be respected. I stand for justice for all, and that I think what is important, and I believe that's also what MBA stands for. And as for Enugu hosting, excellent job, and we commend the governor of Enugu State, we commend their team, we commend the facilities. In fact, for many lawyers, as they are leaving, they are all saying this is really a memory, a lasting memory and impression. about Enugu and the coast city in particular. Because we had for the first time, like you have a conference, Enugu has this ambience and this thing that by probably designed from our, forefathers and mothers. We have not just this 3-arm zone, but also additional of kind of recreational ambience that comes with the other square. Then you have the ICC, then you have to the other side the House of Assembly, Parliament, then you have Government House, then you have Judiciary, and all of those zones, it has this open place, ability to really enjoy that. And I'm so glad it will remain the way it is now. Nothing will ever change again. It's forward ever and backward never. We're happy that space has been reclaimed. And I can see even MBA coming now within next 4 years back again. I can see that because you need a place with facilities. Yeah. And once you can see, I'm telling you, if you go to the Mami Market, it became a favorite spot for lawyers to hang out. Hang out late.
I was going to ask you, beyond the glamour of the law and the conferences and seminars, what the Mami Market?
The Mami Market was good, and of course, they have the boogie night. But the Mami, I'm telling you, my classmates, almost every group were meeting. There was a lot, and people came home. People came from all over. I ate the best roasted plantain, and I was looking for the woman, looking for the number, only to be told that she came from Port Harcourt. Anyway, I found the number. So I said, so you just came from Port Harcourt to roast plantain for us. So it's really an open market. So people came from all over. And then the Enugu people have also the delicacies and the special, and we ate and enjoyed all those special. The palm wine, assorted, and the original stuff. We tell them, please don't bring anything that will give anybody any running stomach. And they lived up to it.
What was interesting is that I got to have amala and the wedding soup.
Wow,
and prepared
diversity.
Prepared by a woman who came all the way from Ibadan.
That's what I'm telling you. It's really interesting. We must continue to encourage this because in MBA, honestly, I see what we need and what we miss out from Nigeria, where people try to crucify these ethnic groups or demonize. In MBA, the unity becomes clear. Even our election can be seamless. Leadership, the accountability, you can see our AGM continue till evening. On the day of the annual general meeting, everybody and every officer gave account. We had our account, we have the treasurer, they will tell you how they are using our money, and this is what we need. They will talk to the people and they answered the question and they debated constitutional amendment, and it just went on for hours. So really we want a Nigeria where we take the best from each ethnic group, so that in that diversity we will find the strength, we'll find political strength. It will be a resource that will bring greater happiness for everyone. Can't you see, you eat amala, you're happy. I ate plantain from specially made from Port Harcourt their own way. And I was very happy.
Okay, Prof. Let's just get to the heart of our business today.
Yeah.
And that is the 30 years of Beijing. What memories?
A lot, because when you think that it was the world's largest gathering of women with about 6,000 delegates, with 189 countries being represented, with 4,000 media persons, can you imagine? 4,000 media, 4,000 civil society. It was really, it was, and the world leaders were determined and for the first time recommitted to women's, to emphasizing that women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. It was also the time of Bill Clinton as the president of America. So the wife was made this powerful statement about women's rights being human rights. It was a very big convening that built on the previous 3 conferences from Copenhagen, from Mexico to Copenhagen City, Copenhagen in Denmark to Nairobi. Nairobi was in 1985 mid-review, and after Nairobi, then we had the Beijing. And interestingly, there has not been any world conference since Beijing. So that's why there have not been any conference. It was the 4th world conference, and so far the last. But now what kind of is decided is that why not build on the declaration, because one of the most important outcomes of that conference was adoption by the real delegates and government, 189 countries, adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action. So when we talk about Beijing plus 30, this is the plan of action we use to assess, to do stock taking, to say how far thus far. And that's what I'm glad that you were able to give overview of it. You can see it covers issues around women and poverty, education and training, violence against women, women and women's health, women and economy, the girl child, institutional mechanism, women and armed conflict, women and environment, all of these very important issues, women and decision making, women power and decision making. And these are, when I look at it, I say, what a master stroke to have identified these 12 critical areas of concern that continue to be relevant, that continue to be material, that continue to be that benchmark for assessing how well we are doing with regard to implementation of that Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action. So they are still, but unfortunately, on the other hand, it can also be depressing when you look at those issues and to think that the world is still grappling with it. Which one are we not grappling with? Poverty still wears a woman's face. Issue of education and training, yes, gains has been made. There has been also dropout of school. Things are becoming expensive for people to aspire to tertiary education. Is it an economy? On the economy, women still play a role in informal sector. They are yet to be mainstreamed. Politically, we know how it is in the world. And then we can come back to Nigeria to look at this specific, because women's health continue to be a concern. Women maternal mortality, Nigeria is also still one of the highest. So most of these issues, environmental issues, the worst is that climate change has been added to it. Violence against women and poverty still remain the most surreptitious form of violation of human rights of women. And it's not declining, unfortunately. Yes, we've made progress, but we are not where we want to be.
We are not where we want to be. Despite legal frameworks like the VAP Act, reports of gender-based violence remain high.
Yeah.
Why is enforcement such a challenge?
I think enforcement is the biggest challenge, because really, I tell people that I'm a lawyer, I'm a law professor. If you look at the law, the extant laws, is adequate. Even if maybe a specific issues might not be explicitly spelled out. But you find that in law, I give example, even if it's sexual harassment, but you find that even criminal code can deal with it. Existing penal laws on assault can deal with it. So, and then of course we have even National Industrial Act that have also provision covering that. But the problem is implementation. Nigeria has ratified a number of international and regional documents, from convention, United Nations Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Of course, the status of the girl child, is a pointer to the status of a woman. So children in that context, girl children, you look at the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the protocol to the African Charter on the rights of women in Africa. And these set standards, abundant standard, elimination of violence, convention against torture, convention against forced disappearances, convention on women's political rights, trafficking, UN trafficking convention to suppress, protocol to suppress, prevent, and punish trafficking in persons. So we have the laws. These standards are no longer, not a problem. And even nationally, even though there are little gaps and here and there, and some major ones, even in the Constitution, but the fundamental human rights in the Constitution equally apply to women. So, but the challenge is, how do we enforce it, especially if the violations are taking place in private spaces, in homes, at domestic level? It's not necessarily perpetrated by government, but the government has overall obligation to ensure that everyone is protected in both public and private spheres. And even in the public spheres, we still have issues. Sexual harassment, workplace, sexual harassment, of students. And when you talk of environment, women are closest to environment. They are the ones that manage solid waste. They are the ones that cook, the firewood, They even die these days. Kerosene is so out of reach, and we are saying that they shouldn't fetch firewood because of deforestation, because of ecological implications, including erosion. But still, they have to fetch the firewood. But it's not just about fetching firewood, but the dangers women are exposed to in the course of fetching firewood. If I tell you the number of documented cases where women were raped trying to fetch firewood or trying to fetch water going long distance. So these things are fact. So that is part of when you talk of safer cities, even sanitation within the schools, primary schools or secondary school. In one case, the Bisola, and in that case, the Supreme Court said, had the school provided sanitary facility, it happened in Oyo, that this girl would not have had gone to answer the call of a nature in a nearby bush in the school where she was raped. A 13-year-old. So you see how women are exposed to all kinds of risks because of what is happening. With climate change now, it's even worse because people are displaced. With the conflict and insurgency we have, women and armed conflict, you find that more and more are exposed to risk. And it's not only in Nigeria. I am one of the 3 UN experts that were appointed in 2023 to look at the ongoing war in Sudan. So we are documenting, I am part of independent international fact-finding mission on Sudan and documenting violations of international humanitarian law, laws of war, and human rights, looking at the root causes of the conflict, identifying perpetrators, dealing with the issue of victims, for the purposes of, collaboration with the ICC, International Criminal Court in Rome. And so you see impunity galore. The body of women is a war site. Women rape has become an instrument of war. Normalized in any little insurgency, even Nigeria that's not in open war, like Sudan. What happens in IDP camps has been documented even by UN experts within Nigeria. And these are unacceptable. Is it not in Nigeria that Chibok girls since 2013 are still missing? The Dapchi girls, what's this lady, what's her name, from the Yobe one, the Dapchi school incident, is still missing till date. So when are we going to find these girls? And what is their crime? Is their crime being born a woman? Or is their crime being born a Nigerian? That somebody will go to school, be in the boarding school, and then is kidnapped from there until date. We are talking about them. There are people missing from Bethel Baptist School in Kaduna. There are so many missing children from school in the north and the northwest that are yet to be found, and in other places that are victims of violence against women and girls. So we can go on and on. Every sphere we've been found wanted.
Let's talk about the struggle of Nigerian women, political representation.
This is
what are the barriers? And how can this be dismantled?
There's a lot of barriers. And I think the barriers that keep women out of leadership is also, lack of, is cultural, is stereotypes, is conceptualized dichotomy of the public and the private sphere, the other room politics. And the idea that women belong to the other room, the idea or the concept that women are merely to perform reproductive roles and not productive roles. Women are to be seen. It has also is deep-rooted or ingrained in culture. In cultures and sayings like women are to be seen, not heard, and cultures that believe that women shouldn't feature in the public sphere. So it is a very big problem, because right from Beijing, one of the important markers was recognition. Beijing said provide at least 30%, at least. He didn't ask for too much. He said at least 30% reserved for women for power decision making in public spheres. How far have we fared? If you look, you find that Nigeria performance in terms of gender equality remains relatively low, particularly within sub-Saharan Africa. We rank 29 in the assessment that was done. We are actually in the World Economic Forum gender index mapping. We are 125th place out of 146 countries. That is terribly bad.
That's low.
And if you see the countries that we are their neighbors in ranking, you will see Afghanistan. It's not funny. You will see Yemen. you will see Pakistan, you will see, so these countries, are we, we shouldn't be in their league. Because we are not, what is happening there is not exactly happening in Nigeria. So why should we be in that league? So we ranked 29 behind Namibia, which was ranking high, behind South Africa, behind Mozambique, behind Rwanda, and Burundi, which occupy the first 5 spots for gender parity in Africa. So in Africa, you have number 1, Rwanda, followed by Burundi, followed by Mozambique, followed by South Africa, and then followed by Namibia. So Nigeria is a giant of Africa. How big? What a giant. If you're lagging behind every other person. And at times, other countries, they shudder. We see women from Tanzania, they say, we're surprised about your paltry representation, decimal. That you say you have only less than 5% of women elected into parliament, and then we'll be struggling to answer. Only 4 women in the Senate. About is it 15 or 16 in the parliament, so under 20. What does that mean when you're talking of 360 in the House of Reps and 109 senators? So you find it's less than, it's actually 3 point something percent. Just call it 4%.
That's quite low.
Yeah, it's very low. It's very, very low.
Okay, let's just leave policy. How does the economic inequality, access to credit, land, and resources affect women's empowerment?
The access to the economic, you mean?
Yes.
The economic inequality is huge, including issue of women lack of access to credit, land, and resources. It affects women's empowerment greatly because, I told you that women operate a lot in the informal sector. If you take even any plane in the West African sub-region before Nigeria really got, you see how women carry plastically clothes they sell, textiles, in the plane and, doing all of those things. But when it comes to the big economy, you find that they are not there. And even the important work they do, because importantly, we need to understand that maternity is a social function. And we need to understand that for the economies, they shouldn't be blind to care work that women provide. They shouldn't be blind to the quantification of housework. The sex division of labor that tend to keep women, at housework. They shouldn't be blind to those things. They should recognize that women are really doing what is important to keep society going, and therefore should be encouraged. So where the power is, women are not. Where the money is, women are not. Land is an instrument of, talk about land is a capital. And access to capital is very important. And then look at how disinheritance, women are disinherited from there. And if you go to even assessing loans, because if you are not economically empowered, how do you run for even office?
Yes.
So women need a lot of decent work. There is when you look at public service, yes, they are in the lower ranking ladder of it. There are fewer women in the boardrooms, even though we are beginning to see some major changes in the corporate sector, especially the bank, with women, the number of women leading in Nigeria. But when you think of percentage, it's still low. We still want something more than that and something better that will put women in a position that they can have sustainable livelihood, in a position that they can have access to basic facilities. When you have a decent work, you're able to provide housing for yourself or pay for one. You're able to have proper dressing. You're able to have access to water, sanitation, and all of those things. This is what we need. Because without economic, people ask women, why can't you opt out of a very abusive relationship? And you see that they cannot because they lack the economic means. Do you know how many women we have had to pay their dowry? And normally we don't even pay the full thing that people go and write a long list. Now the long list in Igbo land, especially Imo State now, is legendary. So, but then some people, when there is a bad marriage, after even the woman has given birth, why should the woman even return the bride price or the dowry? Will you put her in the same condition she was even at the beginning? So now they will write a list. We just ignore the list. We go back to the dowry limitation laws of Eastern Nigeria. It limits dowry to 50 pounds. You go and drop the equivalent, 50 naira, not even up to 5,000 naira.
How do you do the conversion?
To the customer court. We do the conversion as it then was. I said, then where? We cannot do it for the current conversion. But even on a serious note, even if you do it for the current conversion, how much does it come to? It's still nothing.
Yes.
You know, so it's still better than somebody writing a list. You have to return a goat, return a cow, return 20 wrappers. Who will pay that? And that's why they remain there, because and that way they will lay claim to the, even if the person goes and have another children from other, it will still be attributed to the person because you have not refunded bride price. And mind you, death does not nullify return of bride price. So that is the funny one. Yes. Because if the person, even the person marrying, they said, because marriage in Igbo land, for example, is between two families. So even if the husband had died and the woman wants to remarry, you still have to return bride price. Can you imagine?
Okay, Prof, we'll just take a short break. When we come back, we're going to look at culture and religion.
Okay.
And as obstacles to gender equality.
Thank you.
Let's play some bills. We'll be back shortly.
I've been moving. I've been moving. I've been moving. I've been moving. This is the kind of matters. These conversations. This money can never. This should be enough for you. My darling, I believe in the life. Time is to have fun. Let's take this time to get high. Leave confirmation. Cause I've been moving. I've been moving. I've been moving. I've been moving. I'm blessed, all I had sirens. I would run if I had silence. Look good, drama, I'm being honest. Just a little drama, I'm being honest. You can tell that I run out of time. You can tell that I run out of time. Unavailable another times.
Not everything makes it into the headlines, but we bring you the full story. Join Uchenna Cyril Anyoke, a renowned media personality and former president of the Nigerian Publishers Association, as he unpacks the real issues behind the news, from politics to public policy, economy to human rights. Nothing is off limits. Expert guest, in-depth conversation, local and global perspective. New episode every week on Facebook and YouTube. Watch now on Freedom Square TV. Follow for updates and behind the scenes clips. Beyond the headlines, beyond the news.
You are still watching Beyond the Headlines on this special edition on Freedom Square TV. And my guest is still the internationally acclaimed human rights crusader, founder of WACOL, Tamar SARC, Professor Joy Ngozi Ezeilo. She hasn't moved an inch. She's still here.
Yeah, I'm still sitting here.
Yeah, Prof, before we actually went on break, a short break, I drew your attention to the fact that many people think that culture and religion remain obstacles to gender equality. How do we balance respect for tradition with the demand for human rights?
Yeah, that's really true. You know, even though we don't want to say you throw away culture, but remember, culture is supposed to be mirror of accepted usage, and it's supposed to reflect modernity, socioeconomic changes, urbanization, all of those things that are markers of globalization, which is consumerism, travels, migration. But then when it comes to culture, you will see that it doesn't seem to be shifting as it's supposed to shift. Look at all the real Igbo culture that has a negative effect on women. If you look at it, for example, it hasn't shifted. If you go to elsewhere in Yoruba land, it hasn't, except that those that were recognized from beginning were still recognized. There are no new grounds that were breaking, even despite laws. Take, for example, Inukeja and Okeja, Mojeku and Mojeku, Mojeku and Iwuchukwu, all of those Mweke and Anekwe, they have said that women have a right to inheritance, and it's unconstitutional to deprive women of that right. In fact, the late Nikki Toby when he was deciding Mojeku and Mojeku, said we need not go to Beijing, because that came in 1997, 2 years after Beijing. And he used that word, women need not go to Beijing for you people to know that their rights, constitutional rights, should be protected, including for inheritance. So why are we still holding that? People say, oh, a woman gets married and move out of the family. So it's a culture that she is not part of the lineage. And on the other hand, you hear them say inheritance follows the blood. So even if she's married elsewhere, inheritance follows the blood. So she should also be excluded. So it became a bird that can't perch anywhere. So, and because of even all this conception, right from birth, I do say that it takes 10 lives to survive womanhood or girlhood. Because at conception, you could be aborted by selection because they are looking for a male, or abandoned to death. At birth you could be rejected because you are girl.
That was an old practice.
Yeah, but it's happening. It's not an old practice, because people now do sex selection and they can determine ahead of time through the in vitro and all of that. So they abort the ones they don't want. At birth, a woman can be rejected. And then neglect follows such rejection, infanticide and abandonment, and this is worldwide, not just in Nigeria. And you talk about political participation, leadership. It takes 9 lives to survive womanhood. The problem is enormous. It follows them from cradle to grave, and they are primarily caused by culture, religion, tradition, social norms, and negative social norms. So those negative social norms, coupled with religion, some religion become acculturized, that you can't tell which one is Islam, which one is culture, which one is Christianity, which one is the culture. And at times you see total coincidence of collapse, so that even some churches wouldn't protect women's rights, because they're also accustomed to traditions. And even those priests, clergy, imams, they are all brought up in that same culture. So they tend to uphold those cultures. So that is a big problem. That's why we say we need a lot of sensitization, targeting negative social norms, and targeting patriarchal structure, trying to shift mind, attitude, transform social norms, so that people can recognize that times have changed and things have shifted, and that we can no longer take benefit of modern times and modern technology and still hold on to those things that causes abuse and degrading and takes away dignity of another. That human right is for women, human right is for girl children, and human right is for all. And everyone should enjoy it equally, because everyone is equal before the law. That we do away with cultures that are discriminatory, uphold ones that binds us, that give us that sense of belonging, that sense of oneness, that sense of our roots and where we are coming from. And we can still do that without suffering women or sacrificing women's dignity and right in protection of those. Unfortunately, in some places, and I'll still use Igbo land as an example, even the Umuada phenomenon, they've internalized their position that they can't even differentiate, but their men make them custodians of culture. And they are the ones who enforce what is even against them and their fellow women. Take, for example, widowhood practices. And yet they belong to CWO, they belong to Anglican Union, they belong to all of these churches. So what are we doing? So that's why even in WACOL now we have a project, working with Christian women and women culture, or leaders of culture, because we feel it's important, so that we can have this conversation, understand where the problem is, so that they too are not reinforcing violence, so that they too can respond. When you remember Sinachi, a gospel singer, if there were some kind of church protection, solidarity group that talks about those issues, she could have maybe let 1 or 2 people know, they will have protected her. And then she wouldn't have felt, because the issue is that when you think of how women who left marriage, divorce, and all of that are treated, no woman wants that. And women want to be able to be there and raise their children. And because of the children, they may die in marriage. They may not break their silence. which is a problem. And that's why we talk to them that you have to. Gender-based violence is still very rife. Trafficking of women in Nigeria is still going on, even complicating now. Everyone now, the organ trafficking now becoming even a risk for others. Spousal battery, domestic labor, harmful cultural practices, including early, because if you talk of harmful practices, remember it includes early and forced marriage. It includes female genital mutilation, female circumcision, widowhood practice, disinheritance of women from land, from property, despite Supreme Court judgment. So where do we begin? Is it a crime to be a woman? In fact, one client wrote it and said, it appears, and she's not that very literate. She said, it appears that is a crime to be born a woman, given her own struggle in her own rural community. And we've seen women who have been sanctioned for raising their voice. And then they sanction that the whole community, you know what it is to be a community sanction? That they can't walk around. In one case, they say she can't take even a vehicle from there. And she was walking until WACOL came and intervened. And then the community people living outside were scandalized. They say, we didn't even know this was happening in our community. The other day, they nearly lynched a woman. They say he was harvesting a snail in a forbidden forest. All of these things. And again, they forget that hunger, food security. Women are the insecurity. Women are the ones that are closest to children. They would rather not eat than feed their children. So this food insecurity, lack of sustainable livelihood, and women are constantly battling. So the woman lynched. Remember the other time another woman was naked, also paraded in town for apparently also the same snail. And we're not asking questions, even though they were denying they did not get these snails from the forbidden forest. But these are things, digital violence, driven by technology is also high. Porn revenge, globally, not just in Nigeria, the online bullying, cyber attacks, and all of that, So we have a long way. We need to deal with the barricades. We have had milestone. I must admit, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act and Violence of 2015 that is now was part of drafting it. I was at the center of it from beginning to the end. And the Violence Against Persons law that many states have passed, and that also the wives of governors of different states have contributed, and the governors forum and made sure that these laws were passed. They are very beautiful laws, and they protect all persons. But the problem is how many of them are being enforced. Even the issue of spousal battery, inflicting, intimidating, cyber stalking, physical injury, abandonment of wives, rape at the minimum sentencing, they are all there. Maintaining of sexual offenders register. Thank God, Nigeria also is now beginning to maintain that through NAPTIP that is administering the federal act, the VAP Act 2015. But we still have a lot of economic inequality and the lack of workforce participation. In a way, it will improve women's economy. So the gender gap in the participation opportunities is still very wide, with 70% of the country's poor being women. Can you imagine? So poverty wears a woman face in Nigeria. The poorest of the poor. That's what IMF says, representing 49.3% of the population. So poverty wears a woman face. And even Action Aid again did one research in 2014, and it said that women's labor force participation rate stand at 56 compared to 80% of men. So that's also highlighting a substantial disparity in workforce representation. And the gender gaps in terms of wage, that one is even very high and difficult to fulfill. So access to education, healthcare, the gap in adult literacy, even though still high, Nigeria is larger than the sub-Saharan average. So that's where the problem comes, with a 20.5% gap compared to 20.4% for the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, according to World Bank data. So on healthcare, especially maternal and reproductive health rights, deaths due to pregnancy, they are still unacceptably high. Safe motherhood should be a right as a part of right to life. 993 women die per 100,000 live births due to pregnancy-related cause in Nigeria. Isn't that too high? So, as rightly observed by World Bank, the maternal mortality rate has improved, even though it has improved from 1,344 in 2000 to 993 in 2023. It's still high.
Okay, Prof, let's just look at the role of WACOL and Tamar SARC.
Yeah.
What role they've played or they're playing in bridging the gap between victims and justice. Are there striking successes?
Yes, a lot. Because I'll tell you, from 1997, WACOL started. I think our legal aid began actively in 1999, but by 1998, we had few cases. So between then and now, 28 years, WACOL has provided, just call it, we said 1,000 something, call it 82,000 free in difficult circumstances. WACOL continue to be a leader in promoting human rights education, in making women's rights a reality, in translating these laws and making sure they are effectively implementing, in educating administrators of justice, the whole law enforcement agency, government, judiciary about these laws and how they must and should work for women. So with that type of sensitization, and in particular engaging in dialogue, because we need to also dialogue, understand where others are coming from, and then and find a common solution. So we have engaged with traditional and cultural leaders, religious leaders. We've worked on issues like trafficking. We have offices across Nigeria and even West African sub-region. And of course, we do a lot of international work as well, engaging human rights bodies within Africa and beyond. And when you look at, but what really is closest to us, to mark, is that when you talk of access to justice, because rights in the book or laws in the books is one thing, and if people don't recognize their rights, how do they respond to it? So we have what we call legal literacy series we publish. We educate people on this. We importantly, for those who have suffered violation, provide them assistance to seek redress, to get justice when they are in search of redress. Because if they don't get justice, how do you get them empowered or even to believe in those rights, that they are not mere rhetorics? So the issue of justice is so central to the work we do, that a woman can drop in. We're the first to build shelter for women in Nigeria. And that was my first house building experience as a woman, that in 2001, by 2000, we've acquired the land, and by 2002, we have finished building an ultra-modern shelter. Before then, in 1998, we started offering safe space and shelter for women. So WACOL started in 1998, we had a house, and then we built our own specifically for this issue. And then, of course, like now, we're also focusing on skill empowerment and having a very huge skill empowerment center for women. And we've acquired also a place for that purpose. Because I believe in real empowerment. We started what we call Widows Weep Not, Women's Economic Empowerment Project. We have widows group with sponsors, CBOs, not just in Enugu State. We sponsor them across Nigeria, and we try to make sure they have flexible funding, microcredit that runs, not a question of the one you collect back, revolves, and the one that they can use and empower themselves. So we do quite a lot, because for us, gender equality and women's empowerment go hand in hand. And we believe in empowerment of all women and girls, that will lead also to prevention of violence. It will reduce violence, sexual and gender-based violence significantly. So it's not easy, it's not uhuru. I wouldn't say that our work at WACOL or Tamar SARC is done. It's through support of donors that we still get by. We know that Tamar SARC was a special initiative of me. I named it Tamar after the first woman in the Bible that was raped. And then when Justice for All approached us, and then we approached the Enugu government that we want to work with them. And then the gender donated a facility. We renovated the Ministry of Justice, heavily under the leadership of the Honorable Attorney General Tony Ani. Also drafted beautiful MOU that brought together health, justice, women affairs, and that even the police asked to be joined. So that's how we started it. And WACOL was the one overseeing that center. And from there, we finished that project and we continued because it's already a registered name of WACOL in terms of subsidiary of WACOL, that Tamar SARC. And the idea of Tamar SARC was specialized services for women victims of sexual assault. And it was to provide that in a way that is a one-stop center and a comprehensive center that will deal with medical, deal with legal, deal with psychosocial, and deal with the whole counseling, a whole gamut of whatever is required to make the woman who is a victim traumatized whole and become a survivor. Is all what is envisaged by Tamar SARC.
Okay, we have the younger women, and we have those we call the Gen Zs.
Yeah.
Okay, how can they take ownership of this movement?
Yeah.
Of course, and in what ways will they be different from what the older generations have done? Because if you take a proper look, the life of the Gen Zs seem to be radically different from their own life.
Sure.
So how do you find the synergy between the old and the new?
A lot, and I think we use them because we started this by 2020 during that COVID time. We launched what we call Girls Will, for example. Girls Will, the girls can and they can achieve anything, and the focus was on STEM. Getting women, into science, technology, engineering, mathematics. These days we call it STEM, even arts. Because women can excel in any profession, including art. You're right, Gen Zs, we must recognize that we have to hand baton to the next generation. And we must begin to bridge that generational, intergenerational gaps. I, for one, have recognized it throughout my career, and I mentor women, and that's why when WACOL started, I said 95, if not 99% of the workforce will be women, because I believe in women leadership, building women as transformational leaders.
That was a discrimination.
No, it wasn't at that time. But now, of course, we include men in our work because we recognize that we cannot get that change and get to where we are without men. And progress for women is progress for men, and that we have to also catch them young and then make sure that they have the right mind. I recall one of the research I was doing over 20 years ago, and I went to one school, think WTC. When I asked them what's the difference between man and woman, a boy jumped up and said the difference is clear. I said, wow, this is masculinity. And this one, we want them to have positive masculinity, not negative one. So look at the trafficking work we did. We call it youth advocate. Once we brought youth advocates, the training was online, their work was online. There are people we have never seen, but we saw their photos and we verified them and everything. And they were young people. Come and see campaign. Come and see what they do on trafficking. So we cannot do this work, you're right, because the approach, and they are quite effective with social media. They are quite effective with dissemination. They will tell you the channels that work, for young people that they listen, and then how to bring them on board to what you're doing. So it's very important in ICT, and we have abundance of youth that make up huge population of our country. So why not men and women get them involved in the fight, and fight for respect for human rights, of women of all, and for access to justice for all. So human rights education within that context is a cornerstone, so that people understand the gender dimension, that women are not trying to take over. Women are not saying they want to become men, but we are saying that sex discrimination, that they are recognized right, that they be treated fairly as human beings, capable of enjoying right and equal right with men.
Well, if for perchance, which I know you do, but if in the very official capacity you have the ears of the leaders of Nigeria today, and what would you advise them? What would be the action you want them to take to immediately ensure that all the items listed in the Beijing Declaration, at least 80% of that will have been achieved in Nigeria?
Yeah, I think the issue is that, yes, we had the Ministry of Women. It's a machinery, an institutional mechanism, recognized, by Beijing Declaration. In fact, our own was established at the eve of the Beijing. We went to the regional forum in Dakar, and then it was under Abacha, the wife of Abacha. They were announcing the establishment of Ministry of Women Affairs. So, but it looks like, even in retrospect, the ministry is becoming like a drawback because then every issue is cocooned and they don't have the budget. So we would like to see the Ministry of Women Affairs empowered to have both the technical capacity and the financial capacity to do the work that will bring to fruition the 12 critical areas of concern. But beyond that, we need to mainstream gender across other MDAs. We cannot just leave it to Ministry of Women Affairs. They alone cannot achieve it. All hands must be on deck. Civil society, gender-focused group, faith-based organization, private sector, they must all be on board. The status of women in Nigeria appears to be a case of one step forward, two steps backward. You see the rejection of the 5 gender bills then by the last 9th assembly. Now we have the special seat before the 10th assembly, and we hope that that special seat can pass. You notice that the Gender and Equal Opportunity Bill, GOB, has been now, we don't know the status anymore. Some states are trying to pass it, but it's been there in National Assembly. Our late friend and colleague, Obi Nwankwo, championed this thing. May God bless her soul. Amen. And I hope that in her memory, that this bill and this gender and equal opportunity bills that she really championed and really wished that Nigeria would get to have, it comes to fruition. Accountability for women and girls' rights is a state responsibility, and state must recognize. But I see where the problem is budgeting. You hardly find a budget that goes to women's issue. Is it that woman who turns up in police station? Will that police station be able to handle the woman, even provide her medical? No. Rather, they will even tell her that we don't have money to go and arrest, that we don't have vehicle to go and arrest. Will a woman who dies from maternal mortality, what is the air budget that goes to prevention of maternal mortality and to even paying for a woman to have birth, knowing that that childbirth is important, that reproductive role for as a social function? Look at countries looking for women to have children, and women are having less and less children. And the country have the pyramid, inverted pyramid in terms of population growth. Older people are working till 70 and above, and then their youth population is declining. Now we have it, we are not paying attention. Nigeria must protect, respect, fulfill the human rights of women. And the conclusion reached is that gender equality is both a cause and a consequence of gender discrimination, sexual and gender-based violence, and women's access to equal education, to employment, resources, power, participation. We are not where we are. Where the power is, women are not. It's still like a mirage. So we must make sure that women's rights are really a reality. So the time is now. The journey has not been easy. It has been treacherous. Gains have been made, progress have been made, milestone recorded. The barricades are still there. Government, if they are serious, we put their money where their mouth is. We need political and economic leadership, not just political commitment. We need that backed up by money, because money will make it possible. If you don't provide for women's health, if they are not, they don't have access to, how can they get it? If the legal aid doesn't cover issues of concern to women and deals with crime, how can it cover their socioeconomic needs? So we need to prioritize gender accountability and advance the status of women and ensure that the commitment made in Beijing becomes a reality. We are still off the mark. We've done well in some areas, I must say, the law, but law is not a panacea. And law in action is different from law in books, de jure and de facto. So we need to bridge them and bridge that gap to make sure that this law works for all and that women's rights are human rights. And 30 years down Beijing, Nigeria women can raise their hand and their voice, and they will know they count and they matter, even in laws and constitutional laws, the constitutional law governing the country.
Yes, Prof, I want to thank you. I believe that in spite of the progress you've made and the young women have made, that the biggest room on the world is room for improvement.
Sure.
There's still room for improvement. But I think I've been fulfilling my duties if I let this conversation go without actually going a little bit political.
Well, that's
yes, that has to do with what's happening in the Senate between Senator Natasha. Of course, is a topical issue. Is one prominent woman in the Senate, and of course, What are they politicize the issue? But what's your thought on that?
Anyway, of course, it's sub judice, and I'm a lawyer.
Okay,
I'm a senior advocate. I'm a live bencher. It is a court, and it's a court, and it's really at a critical junction. So anyway, definitely we understand what is sexual harassment. We understand the need to have laws that protect women. We understand the need for women to have their voice, and we want all women, to get there. But then when it is already a subject of court, and for people like us that are also high level, a professor of law and SAN, then it might not be professionally okay.
The man who said there was also a SAN, and he ran away from the matter.
Yeah. So it will not be professionally okay for me. But of course, I'm a passionate advocate for women's rights, and I'm a passionate advocate for ending all forms of violence, including sexual violence against women.
Okay, Professor Joy Ngozi Ezeilo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, OON, of course, Life Venture. I don't think we'll thank you enough for finding time to be here. We want you to go on and on and on and on.
I know.
Of course, time is not our friend. Thank you for sharing your insights and for your tireless commitment to advancing the rights of women, not only in Nigeria, but globally. Well, to our viewers, 30 years after Beijing, the story of Nigerian women is one of progress, pain, resilience, and unfinished business. The challenge before us is clear: to ensure that equality is not just promised, but lived in every home, community, and institution. Of course, it has been beyond the headlines on Freedom Square TV, and of course, our guests had been Professor Joy Ngozi Ezeilo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And we hope
you.
that when we call on you soon, you will oblige us with your presence.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and importantly, the public issues and issues of public interest you do take on your program. I would just say more grace to you and to your team at Freedom Square. Yeah, it's really freedom. We all have to be in it together, and we are in it together.
Thank you very much. And to our viewers, this conversation is not over. You can continue on our Facebook page, on our YouTube at Freedom Square TV. Thank you for being a part of this conversation, special edition of Beyond the Headlines. So, see you on Monday. Have a lovely day.